get notified,
Hmm.
presumably. Just so
Yeah.
I have, your full consent and I'm not just recording you for a
Right.
podcast accidentally.
Yeah, no worries. Full consent given.
Thank you. Alrighty. Well, yeah, well, as I say, we're very relaxed. I don't edit, so we'll roll into it as we do. And welcome to the podcast now.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, good to be here.
Good. But yeah, it took a moment when we arranged this for me to figure out that you're only like an hour's difference from where I am, like time
Oh,
zone
really?
wise. When people say central, I'm thinking, oh, it's like 2, 3 hours away from the East Coast. And then I was like, oh, well,
Yeah,
actually, yeah, it's only an hour out.
yeah,
So
we're
it was
pretty
very easy for
pretty
that.
close. Well, good.
Yeah.
Where are you located, if you don't mind?
So I'm based in New York, New Jersey. So
Okay.
I've
Nice.
only I've only been in the US for a couple of years, hence my
Uh-huh.
accent not
Sure.
fitting my location.
Yeah, I was wondering when I was watching the podcast, I was like, I wonder if he's doing this in the middle of the night. I don't know.
Sometimes I've done that
With
before. I've
someone.
gotten up at 3 a.m. to do one in Japan before, which was
Oh yeah.
interesting.
That's
Yeah,
dedication. Yeah.
yeah. Whereabouts are you located? So you're at Central Missouri area,
Uh
I think.
yeah, St. Louis is where I'm at right now. Yeah.
No,
That's where I
always
was
been
that's
from.
where I was. I was born there, lived there for a few years as a kid, and then moved around a lot. But like extended family was always here, so St. Louis, no matter where I was always kind of where I came to. And then all my family, like my immediate family, ended up here. So after living in on the West Coast for a little bit, just moved back here. Makes it easier with kids when you've got a lot of family around, uh, free babysitters and all that.
It is what I would, I guess, when I think of it, is what I consider kind of family area, uh, more so than like New York, which seems very, very young or very old. There's no middle ground, really.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
I don't know.
yeah, I can see that.
I don't know why I
I've
fall into
never
that.
actually been to New York, which I would love to. It's some place that like I could see myself living someday,
Yeah,
maybe when I'm old, I guess.
that's the
But
trick.
yeah,
You wait till the kids go off and do something, and then move to New York and enjoy, paying too much for rent.
sure.
So which we
Well,
all do.
that's there's not a lot of places where that's not the case anymore.
It's true. That is true. So we're gonna, I mean, we've already dove into it a little bit, but I'm gonna start with a very simple question,
Yeah,
which I hope you're prepared for now.
I
Who
hope
are
so.
you?
I am Neil Coney, a cartoonist, creator, writer, drawer of the Other End comics. That's kind of my claim to fame,
As you're coming to fame, that is how I
as
found you,
much as
I
there
think,
is. Yeah. Yeah,
from
how long have you been
Instagram.
reading the comic? If you
It's been like it's got to been a couple of years, right? Or it feels like a
Yeah,
couple of years. That I think I stumbled across
sure.
one, and it was the classic Instagram thing of you see something, you like it,
Yeah.
and then you don't follow it,
Yeah.
which is I feel like how a lot of people interact with Instagram nowadays. If you see something, you're like,
Oh
"That's
yeah.
cool, that's funny, I'll click like on that," and then you don't
Yeah.
follow it. And then I think it was very much like algorithm gets hold of you, keeps feeding you those things. And I think there must have been a moment where I'd seen a few of yours, and they'd been so different, kind of content style wise. Like I'd seen one and it was very pop culture, and another one was very not pop culture. It was just a bit more slice of life. And I wasn't sure at first that it was the same first person. I thought, oh, I've seen this style of illustration before, but I haven't. I assume a lot of people stay in the same lane. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, and then checked out more, and since then I've been reading ever since.
Well,
Find
thanks.
me that
Yeah.
you have.
Yeah.
How long
Yeah.
have you been
Yeah.
drawing
That's
it?
what's that?
How long have you been drawing it?
Um, so it's kind of it's always had the same name, but it's kind of
Right.
gone through iterations forever. I've been drawing at least comics that I have titled The Other End for close to 15 years, maybe.
Really?
But that was before I even started posting them online at all. I
Yeah.
started just kind of putting stuff on just like single panel stuff, really not good at all. I was just learning digital art at the time, so I was just kind of practicing drawing up funny ideas that I had and posting them just on a Facebook page. It was that long ago. It was when Facebook was relevant, if you can believe it. Uh, and then yeah, just kind of built from there. I got a website that I started posting on, but this was at the end of like websites relevancy, so it never like got many views then.
Right.
And then yeah, about maybe 5 years ago, I kind of or at least like a while ago, I made it as kind of a character driven thing where I had a cast of characters, and then like
Hmm.
5-ish years ago, I kind of revamped it even more, where I was like, I'm just gonna do whatever seems funniest.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna like just limit myself to a certain type of comedy. Um, and then yeah, I've kind of just been going down that path for a while. And then 3-ish years ago, I think, is when my partner started writing more with me, where we
Right.
kind of worked together on it. And yeah, that's where I've kind of found the most success when we started working together, you know.
That's
Um,
so cool.
and yeah, so that's a very long-winded answer to be like 15 years.
Years, but no, that's cool because it's. I think it's rare now to find projects which have had that kind of longevity, even though it's like, see, it's changed through time for you. I
Mm,
think usually when I speak to people, they're like, "Yeah, I've been doing this a couple of years. I've been doing it a couple of years, and this is just starting to take off," or they've been doing it for a very long time, but it was nowhere near related to what they were doing
yeah,
in
yeah.
previous life, sort of thing. Is that always been the case for you then? You've always been within the illustration comic realm, or have you been other jobs?
So yeah, I mean, art has always been what I've done. I like held on to the comic. I read a while ago, like when I was really struggling, like no views, nobody was reading my comic. I read that anybody can make a living from a webcomic. You just have to go at it for 10 years. Uh, and that has seemed to be the case for me because I just kept at it through thick and thin. And this past year is kind of the first time that I've been able to basically do comics full time. Um, uh, for a while, up until just this past year, I was working as a storyboard artist and writer and stuff on a YouTube channel.
Mhm.
It was Pencilmation. It was kind of a kid-focused cartoon thing. So I was just kind of working there. It's kind of a day job. Um, Let me do art, and give me plenty of free time to keep working on the comic. Uh, so yeah, that's pretty
That's
much what I
interesting.
what I've been doing.
I can kind of see that as
Yeah.
well within your work of just the way you frame things. It's very you've got a lot of motion for a comic strip, right? Like
Yeah.
when a lot of people think comic strip, they think the classic Snoopy, Garfield, whatever. Three panes, not much happens movement wise. It's all words or it's all like single
Yeah.
moments. Whereas yours cuts across like a camera.
Yeah.
So like you were saying,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
definitely see your storyboard influence.
Yeah, storyboarding it has definitely helped. And every so often I'll see a comic where I'm like, oh, they can't even do the shot reverse shot. Like that's so simple. Stop breaking the 180 rule. Like what are you doing? Like I just think it's more interesting to kind of take some of not
Yeah.
necessarily filmmaking techniques because
Yeah.
when you're talking about storyboarding, it's as much comic techniques, as it is
Mm.
filmmaking. But to not kind of take advantage of the medium. Um, I think is a mistake that a lot of, or not a lot, but that certain cartoonists will kind of fall into. Not that there aren't great comics that aren't, very static and just word focus, like that's certainly can be successful and really good, but my favorites are always a little bit more cinematic, I guess, for lack of a
Yeah.
better word.
It's interesting you say that actually. I had Aaron Long on, who's an animator, has worked on various things, BoJack
Mhm.
Horseman and stuff in the past, and
Yeah,
he does
yeah,
his own series called Sublo and Tangy Mustard. And we were talking about animation and how it frustrates him that people don't fully utilize animation for what it is. Like you have a world where you can do literally anything you ever wanted, and people make life.
Yeah.
It's like just
Yeah.
general day-to-day life. So it's like, yeah, you can do whatever you want, but people are like, nah, I'm just gonna do
Yeah.
standard stuff. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's true of a lot of mediums, I think.
Mm,
That's one of the rules that I try and put on myself when writing a comic that I I don't always follow it, you know. It's
mm,
when you're trying to get at least a couple comics out a week. Um it can be hard, but I try to do something that would not work or at least work as well if it wasn't a comic, you know. Like I
yeah.
want to do something that that serves the medium or is served by the medium. And I think that's when stuff is done the best, you know, when it's like it's not trying to be a book or be a movie or whatever else. It's just trying to be a comic and taking advantage of what you can do in a comic. Um, like for example, you can get away with hiding a lot of little jokes or like stuff that would just fly by in like a movie or an animation or whatever. Um, I think you can put in a comic because people will spend as much time reading the dialogue as they will like background stuff or like a scene description that you put at the bottom or something like that. So like you can really take advantage of that in interesting ways. Like the comic that I'm putting out tomorrow, um, the punchline at the end, as much as there is one, is just like a sound effect note, you know, that is just like that's the last joke. Where if that was just the end of a sketch comedy sketch, it probably wouldn't really work. But for a comic, I think at least it should work fine.
You'll find out tomorrow when you
Yeah,
publish it.
exactly. Yeah. The
Yeah, I
Reddit
mean,
will let me know if it worked.
yes. The ultimate litmus test of whether something survives or not. Post on Reddit. Just
Yeah,
see. Wait and see. That's so
exactly.
crazy. I mean, I guess that's maybe a question then, because you've been going for a while and through a few platforms and,
Mm.
different audiences. Do you find you get different reaction depending on what platform you're kicking out?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
So for the longest time I wasn't posting to Reddit just because as everyone says, like it's you get the most I don't know if it's the most honest feedback, but like
Mm,
Instagram's kind of a little bit training wheels, and I don't mean that in a bad way. Like that's how it should be. People, if they don't like something, you can just not comment. Like that's fine, you know. And on Instagram, I almost never get negative comments, and I that was my biggest platform for the longest time. And I just enjoyed posting there, and it's just like the community as much as there is one on any social media. The community there is like the most supportive. Um, but then when I started posting again to Reddit, I think it was last year, like beginning of last year, maybe.
mhm.
Um, uh, yeah, you definitely get a lot more um negative feedback, a lot more people, you know, giving you what they think is constructive criticism, you know.
I see. Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but yeah,
Yeah, I definitely think there's like as you say, it's not necessarily the most honest feedback, but you're going to get feedback regardless
yeah,
of whether you want it or not. And I think
yeah.
that's what I learned with Reddit was doesn't matter what you post, someone on there is going to give you an opinion, but you're going to
Oh
have
yeah.
to be able to
And they
take
think it
that
is the
opinion.
most important thing that you hear that opinion. Like they're
Yes.
like, you need to hear, listen, you gotta hear this. And it's like, I don't care. I don't usually look at the comments, or rather, I don't spend much time looking at the comments.
Yeah.
Usually across Patreon, obviously, as long as I have the time, which,
Yeah.
you know, sometimes a week will go by and it's like, I just don't have the time. But as long as I have the time, I'll at least read all the comments, and try to respond in some way. On like Reddit, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, I don't look ever. Like that's those I see as mostly dead platforms. You know, I don't. I feel bad for the people who are still giving it the old go, who are like,
Yeah.
no, this is a good place to be. It's like, no, it's not. I'll still show you the comics, you know,
Yeah.
but I'm not going to read the comments. Instagram and Reddit, I'll glance at it.
Hmm.
Uh, uh, Usually after I post the comic, like when me and Marissa are kind of out and about, like when we're in the car, one of us will read through comments either saying particularly nice things or particularly mean things that are funny to read.
That's great. I love that. And yeah, I kind of agree. Well, it's actually I agree and I disagree with Facebook being a dead platform, but
Mm.
only based on a chat I had fairly recently with an artist called WTF Pots. She makes ceramic pots, but they're for lack of a better term vulgar. They're,
Okay.
grotesque. It's prolapsed anuses. It's,
Sure.
you know, lots of nipples, lots of
Yeah.
orifices, all in these like wonderful little clay pots.
Yeah.
And she posts them to Facebook groups. So rather
Okay.
than just Facebook, she goes into the groups, which are, to do with whatever the pot is about in a vague way. And then the outrage which people show within Facebook, she utilizes because they reshare it and tag all their friends of, oh my God, look at this. It's
Mm.
awful. I was like, it's just a really weird, like, but neat way of encouraging engagement with your post by knowing people
Yeah.
are going to be shocked by things.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, that's somebody who's got a total understanding of what social media is best for. Like
Yeah.
that's fun. Yeah, that's cool.
I think she's making a list of like groups she's been banned from.
Yeah.
This is like this is I mean, there's so many groups on Facebook you could just go forever
Yeah.
and they just never stop you.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, I just never go on Facebook anymore. I haven't for a while. I'm only on there for like the 2 minutes that it takes to post a comic, and I'll always
Mhm.
see at the top now it's some AI garbage, usually like some woman with 1,000 babies for some reason. I don't know why that's always at the top of everything. It's got like a million comments that I'm sure is just more AI commenting. It's a nightmare. Yeah.
It's usually some
My
outrage,
parents are
some news
still, that's
post.
what they're all about though. So somebody's using it.
True. That's true. I have questions about your comic
Yeah.
because
Yeah. Go
I
for it.
love I love your comic. I
Thank
when
you.
I reached out to you, I was like, I really hope I get to chat to you because it's one of the few comics I've read. When it comes out, I have no idea what's coming, right? Some
Yeah.
comics, I
Yeah.
think there's a predictability to it all, but every single time I read it, I'm like, I open a frame and I'm like, okay, in my head, I'm trying to see where this is going to go before
Yeah.
anything comes through. And I think being in art and being interested in comics and that kind of thing, I think that's
Yeah.
like the natural thing to do. But to encounter
Mhm.
one
Oh
which
yeah.
is in a way so abstract, I'm start thinking,
Yeah.
I know where this is going to end. And I'm like,
Now, I do always there's always one comment where somebody's like, well, this is the normal one. They've completely run out of ideas. This one I totally saw where it went. And every single comment, it's always somebody different. So it's like for every weird idea, there's some person that perceives it as normal, which I think is great. That's my favorite
it's
thing.
amazing. But I guess my question too is because I mean I know everyone's creative process is different, and my own
Yeah.
process is different to everybody else's, and I'm like, right, do you start with a punchline, or do you start with your initial intro when you're
Okay.
writing,
So
or even when you're writing with your
yeah.
partner? Like,
Yeah. So we've kind of gotten into a groove lately that's been working for us of how to write. We'll always like start in the evening, and Marissa generally comes up with a bunch of prompts, just like random ideas. Um, the best ones are usually like really melodramatic, relatable situations.
okay,
And then she'll just throw those to me, and I'll just like riff, and then we'll kind of riff a little bit back and forth of just like going from that initial idea, just kind of improv
mhm.
style where that idea goes. And then we'll record those conversations. Um,
Oh,
and then we'll like transcribe them down, take a look how it looks, and then usually we'll have to like tweak and twist it, to make it more logical, more of a story. We want at least some sort of like conclusion. And we're definitely like there are always people who are like, oh, this is LOL so random humor, how cringe, you know. Um like that's not what we're trying to do. We always want like we want it to be unexpected and weird. But like it's always got to have some internal logic and ideally a basis of relatability. Like you want like people um either dealing with a situation that starts off like understandable and then reacting in understandable ways. So that's like kind of the formula that we use to make the comics, usually, at least.
That makes sense. Yeah, I think, yeah, like you say, I think it's easy to look at it and think this is just throwing a bunch of stuff at a wall, right? It's
Yeah.
it's it's random in the same way, I guess, like meme culture is pretty random in that sense of someone picks something and then that suddenly becomes the joke, and everyone's sat wondering why that's the joke. But there is an internal logic, like you say, and I guess
Yeah.
a suspension of disbelief with every single strip because
Yeah.
you're introduced and you're like, oh, this is how this character reacts. Let's take
Yeah.
that to the end point, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the important thing, like keeping that internal logic. And yeah, kind of like one thing that we do I think subconsciously as much as anything is like kind of disregarding rules that aren't important, you know, like it doesn't matter if I'm trying to think specifics but there's a lot of times like kind of lost my train of thought. Like I'm trying to think of some specific
Rule you've thrown
example.
away. I mean, it's kind of like the 180 rule,
Uh
right? Like in film, of like if people say you
yeah,
can't do it, but every so
yeah.
often,
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like if there's
yeah,
something, some like reaction that somebody has. Well, an easy one is like the names.
right.
Like people get so confused when I use a name that's not traditionally the gender of the person
Hmm.
that has that name, and it's like why does that matter? It names you don't have to have certain like genitals to have certain names. Like that's
Yeah,
not a hard and fast rule. So like it's just kind of funny sometimes just to play with that because it's not what people expect. It doesn't matter, so you can just kind of ignore that and just kind of do what's unexpected there, you know?
makes a lot of sense.
I don't know if
I
that
was,
makes sense.
I mean, it made sense to me, but then I enjoy it. So to other people, maybe. I mean, maybe that's a good question. How do you describe your comic to someone
Um
without showing them
uh
the comic?
I don't yeah, yeah, I don't know. It's just uh an overly long kind of gag style comic. Like I usually look at like sketch comedies to kind of point to like some of my favorites being like Auntie Donna
Right. Yeah.
and like I Think You Should Leave, you know, it's kind of similar in that where they're kind of comedy sketches more than they are like traditional set up punchline comic gags because like people are I see a lot of comments not just on mine occasionally on mine but on a lot of comics who are doing similar stuff to what I'm doing where they're like whatever happened to just a setup and punchline comic and it's like the only reason that that's what people think of as a comic strip is because that's what comic artists were forced to do with newspaper comics. Like there's no inherent rule in the medium that says that's what you should do. Like that's just the culture around the commerce of comics. You know, that's I feel like it's a good thing that more comics are breaking away. Again, not that there aren't great comics that are doing that format, you know, like that's a very valid way to do a comic, but it should not be the standard. Like that's I feel like we need
Yeah.
to really move away from that for comics to be a bigger part of the entertainment cultural landscape, you know?
Definitely. Yeah, and I think we're alike in the sense of like you say, like there is a place for all the different kinds of comics, right? There's a place
Yeah.
for the Garfields, the Snoopies, the single frames, or
Yeah.
the New Yorker one, which one which
Yeah.
I also follow a few of them, and I'm start thinking I don't know what's going on in a few of these, but
Yeah.
confusion's there. But at the same time, yeah, it's good to push that boundary. But also at the same time, on that thought, I think when people make comments like that, I'm start thinking, well, this is just something new, right?
Mhm.
You have 100 years of that kind of stuff already, which fits that. Aren't you bored of that form?
Yeah, that's another thing. It's like if everyone making comics today was still doing that,
Yeah.
it would just be repeating the same jokes endlessly. Like there's only so many things that you can do that way. And you see that in every medium where people are like, why do you have to make this weird movie? Why can't movies just be like these old, like old John Wayne movie or whatever? And it's like, you can still watch those. Those aren't gone. Like,
Yeah.
watch those. Some people are still making those, but like, like, yeah, there's just new stuff. Like, that's good. We want to see new things.
In a way, though, you just give me an idea that I love the idea of like a social media platform that for everything, every one thing introduced, something gets deleted. So there's like a
Yeah.
limit to that would be an amazing idea of just 100 pieces,
Yeah.
and you upload and something gets erased. It's like it's
Yeah.
gone forever. Sorry, guys.
Yeah. Yeah. I could see some advantages there for a lot of reasons.
Yeah, yeah. Just remove some stuff, but we can have
Yeah.
other stuff, weirder stuff.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think the way someone asked me about it, who I was talking to today, and I was like, "I makes the other side or the other end even." And I was like, "It's a great comic. It's kind of abstract." And the way I described it was, it's like Network meets Far Side. It's so exaggerated from like 90s, 2000s Cartoon Network, but it's still a
Yeah.
comic at its heart. And that
Yeah.
was the only way I could figure out how to describe it. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, it's funny that you bring up the 90s thing because that's something that I've been uh a little bit more consciously trying to incorporate over the
mm,
past like that those kind of um style elements. Uh because like whenever that game Pizza Tower. Do you know that game?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I've heard
So
of it.
when that came out, um, I was just like, this art style is so cool. Like this is so fun. And I was talking to my buddy, and I'm like, why aren't more people doing this kind of style, like this exaggerate, like this kind of 90s
Yeah.
exaggerated, kind of grungy, almost more inspired by like the underground comic movement.
Mm,
Like why isn't that more popular? And he was like, well, why don't you do it? And I was like, that's a good point. If I think it should be more popular, maybe I should be incorporating more of that. So like I kind of intentionally started doing a little bit more of that. Not like just like trying to crib the style entirely,
yeah.
obviously, but like just kind of getting looser with with kind of the art because for the longest time what I strived towards or not necessarily strive toward but found most comfortable was doing like deadpan stuff like very like characters very like staring ahead um almost influenced by like poorly drawn lines. I think that he's
Yeah.
somebody who is like perfect at that understated um kind of art style and like that's kind of what I was doing but I was like maybe I can still kind of do that sometimes but incorporate a lot more bigger fluid
Mm,
cartoony stuff and just started doing that just get people being like this is the grossest art style that I've ever seen. It's almost as bad as Rugrats and I'm like okay I know you're meaning that not as a compliment but I'm taking that one as a compliment.
yeah. I think if someone's coming along and comparing you to one of the best cartoons from your childhood,
Yeah. Yeah,
it made
and
me.
if somebody doesn't like it, I'm never gonna be mad if somebody's like, "This just isn't my thing." It's like, "Great, yeah, no problem." I'd rather be, um, uh, not everybody's cup of tea than like boring, you know?
Definitely. Yeah, I think the one I instantly got reminded of, it reminded me of Cow and Chicken and the art style they used in that.
Yeah,
But it's interesting that you say you used to kind of aim for more deadpan as just kind of
Mhm.
a default. I did wonder whether you kind of like an avid like Marvel DC comic book artist or someone
Mhm.
who's been involved with that and wondered whether they would end up doing that but found their own style doing more surreal stuff or whether
Yeah.
this was just like no we're going straight for this.
So I when I started out, I was mostly inspired by like the stuff I read as a kid. So like Calvin and Hobbes, Foxtrot, that sort of, the newspaper comics. So that's where I took a lot of inspiration and I was like, this is kind of what I want to do. Uh, and then I have always liked comics, the mainstream stuff like Marvel and DC. Um, and so that was something that I was like, oh, maybe someday I'll uh, uh, do something in that space. Uh, but I mean, that's not something that you can like they don't take submissions, so it's kind of a waste of time to just like do that stuff
Yeah.
and hope that they'll find you. You kind of got to make a name for yourself somehow.
Hmm.
Uh, and then maybe somebody in some space will find you. And so that's just kind of what I have been doing for the past 15 years with the comics is just kind of trying to figure out um where my space is, like what am I best at doing? And I think after all this time, this past year, I've finally, after 15 years, kind of found like like a
Found your
space that it's like,
formula.
okay, this formula, this is what um, you know, I'm pretty good at doing. And
Mhm.
maybe some more opportunities will come up. I have had, not I haven't Marvel and DC have yet to call, but I have had, other opportunities coming up in the over the past year, Um, and yeah.
That's fantastic. Some part of me wants to see your writing style, but with very serious graphic novel style
Yeah.
illustrations, just
Yeah, that'd
published
be fun.
within the middle of like a series run, so someone gets thrown off of like, oh, why is this story
Yeah.
suddenly? I don't understand.
Yeah, I thought about doing that. I do want to, if I had more time to
Mhm.
do comics, if I didn't have to, get a certain number out, just for economic reasons,
Yeah.
I would love to spend more time like exploring different art styles and stuff.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, it's as an independent artist, it's hard to find the time to kind of explore that stuff while keeping food on the table.
Yeah, definitely. I think this is a conversation I've had quite a few times with various artists and various friends that once you find something which works, right? Once you find, especially when it's economic, like say, and it's something that you end up start relying on, it becomes very
Hmm.
difficult to make a decision or find time to experiment,
Yeah,
and that drives them away from it in a way. And I
yeah,
think it's almost like an extra skill which you don't realize you're going to need because you had so
yeah,
much free time to begin with, so much time to
yeah,
experiment, and then you get down like, oh yeah, I can't change now.
yeah.
Like, it's a
And I
work.
mean, I don't mean to say like, oh well, I'm just like in the salt mines here where I do have time to explore and like a lot more than I did a year ago.
Mm,
Like a year ago I was working a full-time storyboard job,
yeah.
because I didn't think that I would be able to make a living off of just comics.
Mm,
But being let go from that job uh kind of tossed me into the pool. And I found out like, yeah, if I really push myself and like do this full time, I can make it work.
definitely. I think as well, like you're in a way a great example of that message, which I think again takes people a lot of time to learn. Is just it does take time to figure out what works. I think there's
Yeah,
very much
for
a
sure.
risk of, especially within illustration, of you spend time making something, you think this is a great idea, hours go into it for a lot of people, and then they push it out, and there's no
Yeah.
traction, there's no audience
Yeah.
feedback, and they're thinking, oh, well, I have to change completely now. I have to go do something else
Yeah.
rather than just adjusting what they have and and expecting
Yeah.
that maybe next time it might get a little bit of repeat.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a hard lesson to
And that
learn, I think.
sort of advice, it's always hard when like when like newer and younger artists reach out and are like, I really want to do what you're doing. Like how do I get there? And it's like it's hard to give advice because it's like everybody's situation is different. Like I have been privileged in a lot of ways to be able to keep doing my comic, through thick and thin. Like my partner has always been very supportive, where she's like, I want to make sure you always have enough time to keep this comic going, because this is
Right.
important. And this was before it was like making any money, like a couple $100 on Patreon total.
Mhm.
So like not everybody has like a support system, like a really supportive partner or whatever. So it's hard to like be like, just stick at it for 15 years and you'll get there. Because I mean, I don't know if people will get there. So what I always try to say is like, um, uh, if you do it, if you love it, if you want to do it in your free time and you can make time for it, do it, but only for as long as like you're happy doing it. Like if it's not bringing you any sort of happiness, maybe try something else. Maybe do a different thing. And like I also feel weird because it's like I feel so tenuously like I like a lot of artists. It's like, am I making it? I don't know. I think so.
Yeah, and I definitely
So yeah.
agree. I mean, like, I've been going for a while. I'm not big in any ways. The show's small. It's something I do in my spare time, but I always find it fun. And
Yeah.
that's always been the premise behind it is I get to have conversations and get to chat to people. And when people say, "Oh, you know, how do you do your art? How do you do anything you're doing?" It always feels like you're brushing them off in some way to just be like, "Just keep going, guys. Like it takes
Yeah.
time. Time is a
Yeah.
thing, especially when you get to like an older age. You get people who are
Yeah.
like 18 or 15 coming up and saying, "Hey,
Yeah.
how do I make this work?" And I'm like, I don't
Yeah.
know. I'm still very much in the same situation of you. I just
Yeah.
happen to enjoy doing it, so I keep going.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that is something that I always warn um
Mhm.
young artists who approach me, where I'm like, make sure you're sure before you monetize a hobby. Like it's because like as much as I love what I do and like I
Yeah.
love drawing, like drawing is work now. Like
Hmm.
it's not always fun to draw anymore. It's not like I used to draw just because I loved it and I would just draw all the time, like as a kid and as a teenager and stuff. And I would make comics just for fun. Where now it's like work and I'm not gonna do it for fun. And yeah, in this past year, I've kind of finally found an artistic outlet that like I refuse to monetize with uh I've started painting like tabletop miniatures, like D&D miniatures.
Fantastic.
And my parents have been like, I bet you could monetize that and you could like make a YouTube channel. I'm like, for the love of God, no, this is what I'm doing to not monetize so I can do something artistic that like is just for fun, just for me, no pressure, just on the weekends, just paint this
Yeah.
up. Yeah.
That's amazing. That is such a hard relate for I think everyone I speak to where they say, "Oh, I'm so fed up of doing this thing. Like
Yeah.
I've got to do so many hours into whatever I'm doing, whether they're in a band, whether they're doing whatever." And I always say to them, "It's like you need an outlet. You need
Mm,
something which is not this thing, which you
yeah.
can just push a little time into." And every single time they'll come to me and say, "Oh, so I started crocheting recently. I started doing this." And I'm like, "That's great." And they're like, "I was thinking about making
Yeah.
an Instagram for it." And I'm like,
Yeah.
"Stop yourself right there.
Don't do it. Yeah.
Don't do it. Just enjoy what you're doing." Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's my partner. She's very much a background, kind of I'm the face of the comic. She's kind of a background player, which like with her hobby, all of her hobbies, she's always like, well, maybe I should monetize this one, since you kind of lead the comic, I could do something else here. And I'm like, no, no, because like she loves baking, she loves knitting and crochet and all of that. And every so often she's like, maybe I should start selling baked stuff at the farmer's market. And I'm like, I mean, if you want to, I'm not gonna stop you, but like really think about it. Like this is fun for you now. If you start doing it as a job, it can still be fun. Like I think all artists, well, not all artists, because I've talked to some who it's like, why are you even doing this? Just get another job if you don't love it at all. But most artists, I think, are like, even though it's a job now, I'm still enjoying it, but you don't get that same hit as when it's just a hobby.
Yeah, it's
And
hard
then
to
yeah,
find
some
that.
people do burn out where it's like I don't find any enjoyment out of this at all. And it's like that's not good. You shouldn't be there. That's
Yeah.
not a good
If you
place
get
to
to that
be.
point, that's where you need to take a step back. And I
Yeah.
always find those posts really interesting and kind of like a flag warning for myself and everyone else who is an artist when you see someone who's like, so I'm going to step back from doing YouTube. I'm going to step back from doing painting. I'm going to do this. And you look at the comments, and so many people are like, "Oh, this is so selfish. This is so,
Yeah.
how dare they? We expected this content to last forever." And I'm sort of
Yeah.
thinking, no, you're doing the right
Yeah.
thing. It's no longer fun, so you don't have to
Yeah.
do it. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, whenever I see a YouTuber leave, like it's always like, oh, that's sad, but then it's like, but good for you. Like good. I can always I know that Lindsay Ellis isn't completely stopped, but I'm like, I can always watch Lindsay Ellis's old videos. I don't need a new video every all the
Yeah.
time, as much as I like watching those.
It's interesting as well. I think like we're of that generation where we used to getting shows which ended, right? We
Hmm.
saw sitcoms end, we saw dramas end, and I think the
Yeah.
generation now is just so used to just stuff just keeping going, like just
Yeah.
rolling through it. Like it's hard to come to terms with, guys, but it's a good lesson to learn.
Yeah. Oh yeah. A good ending is perfect. Like
Yeah.
you look at all the best stories in the world, like Lord of the Rings. The
Hmm.
fact that they're trying to make that a Marvel style zombie now just like pains my heart. Like I'm not even a Rings of Power hater. Like I watch it, I'm like, that's fine. But like just out of principle, I'm like, this is just the wrong thing to do.
It's it's grumpy old man territory, but I had a full moment the other day of I found it out that they remade The Crow, the film
Yeah.
from the 90s, and they remade The Crow, and I had a full hour's rant to a friend about
Yeah.
why are they doing this, and we came to the conclusion that they're probably going to try and make some sort of horror universe franchise situation, and I was
Yeah.
just, oh no,
Yeah.
just let things be
Yeah.
a one-off, guys. Just make something new.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so much of that stuff. I really enjoy Marvel, like the Marvel
Hmm.
movies, but I do think that like it's infected Hollywood. Like it's just kind of ruined the minds of so many producers in terms of how things should be done. It's like it worked once, guys, and now it's not even working anymore. Like it's
Yeah,
not just make good movies, just single movies with no ideas to do sequels or anything, or just put endings. If you want to put if you're like, we've got the coolest villain in the world, we're gonna put it in the after credits to tease for the next movie. Just use that one for the first one. Just use that. Just make a good movie, and then be done.
yeah, definitely. And in some ways, follow the advice which you got from a friend of if you want to see a certain type of thing, go make that certain type of thing, right? And I think
Yeah,
that's great advice. It's very much along the lines of if you're not seeing the kind of stuff which you want to make, then go make the stuff you want to make,
yeah,
and you'll either
yeah,
learn it doesn't work or it's harder than maybe you expected to.
yeah. Oh yeah. And
Alrighty,
that's yeah,
well, cool.
to oh, what's that?
So now go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, to kind of um, selfishly loop it back to my comic. Like, I always see people, or not always. I occasionally see people being like, "Oh, you should keep this story going, make a sequel to this comic," and it's like, I don't think I'll ever do that. That seems so uninteresting to me to just like there's no way that a comic that I make as a sequel to an existing comic, there's no way that's going to be good or like as good. It's like the old Walt Disney quote, you can't beat pigs with pigs. You can't make a Three Little Pigs sequel and expect it to be better.
I've never heard that quote.
I use it all the time. It's a great quote.
Can't be pigs with pigs. I mean, that's
Yeah.
it's a roundabout way of putting it. I recently watched a video which was on net called "Unnecessary Sequels," and it had
Oh
Titanic
yeah.
2 in it, which was a film which I didn't know existed. And
Yeah.
yeah, you no, some things don't need sequels. That's the
Yeah.
whole thing.
Yeah.
Alrighty, well, we're coming up to time, so I have two more questions for you, which are nicely
Yeah.
formalized, unlike the rest of my podcast, which is a nice cacophony of whatever
Sure.
we want to chat about.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which I feel like I already kind of know the answer to this, but for the format, I have to keep it. So
Sure.
when you think back to when you were like a kid and what you were planning on your life, is this what you saw yourself doing?
Um, sorta like yeah. I don't know. And the like in this sounds um like depressing, but I promise it's not. But like at my most pessimistic as a child, this is what I was picturing doing. But I was a very optimistic child. Like I was like, I'm gonna be like Walt Disney, king of the world, who has like a multimedia empire. Or maybe at worst, I'll just be an independent artist who's making a living off of art. Like that's the worst case scenario, which is still fine. And that's where I'm at. And so that's, that's something. I
Oh,
don't
good.
think I was picturing this exactly, but like similar
Yeah,
at
I mean,
least.
it would be hard for us to picture this exactly with the internet being what it was when
Yeah,
when
yeah,
we were
that's
children.
very true. Yeah.
But I don't think that's necessarily, pessimistic. I think we all have moments of childhood where we're like, I'm gonna be big.
Yeah.
It's gonna be real big.
Yeah. And hey,
Mine was
I'm still young. Maybe I'll get a medium empire in my 40s. I don't know. We'll see.
you could I mean, all you gotta do is outlive Walt Disney, and I'm pretty sure he didn't die like a ripe old age. So you got plenty of time
Yeah.
to,
That's what I keep
chip away
saying.
at it.
Like he died at 60 something. Uh, I don't smoke,
Yeah,
so maybe I'll make it big in my 80s. That's what I'm holding
that's the
out
way to do
for.
it. Yeah, life expectancy is gradually increasing. We can aim for
Yeah.
the 80s and 90s and still pull off something pretty good, I
Yeah.
imagine.
Yeah, yeah.
Alrighty, and then yeah, I mean, it's been lovely to speak to you, Neil. I have one last question for you, which is obviously I talk to whoever comes on the show of who should I speak to next?
Ooh, that's a good question. There are so many other cartoonists who I'm sure have great stories.
It's a good on the spot question.
Yeah, that's a hard. I should have known. I should have seen this coming. Um, uh, there is a great comic artist who goes by the handle Toothy BJ.
Okay.
He is a great cartoonist. I'm sure he'd be a lot of fun to talk to. Uh, yeah, I'll give that one as my recommendation.
I've not heard of her. She's great.
He's
Oh,
yeah
it's great because he's yeah,
he's great. He's got a lot of really funny stuff.
lovely. I think we've been given some fairly decent advice as well on this episode. I think,
Yeah, oh, well,
talking through
good.
it. It's been fantastic to talk to you, Neil, and catch up and
Yeah,
pick
this
your
is
brain a little
great.
bit. Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
thanks so
Yeah.
much for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Like I say, you gotta go out in the world and make the stuff you want to make and just keep going. It doesn't matter the time or
Yeah.
length. We'll get there eventually.
Yes.
There we
Oh,
go.
yes.
Alrighty. Well, in that case, we'll wrap it up. Thank you for coming to talk to me, and
Thank
we'll talk to
you.
these guys later. All
All
right.
right.